Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Saturday morning webinar, Rain International. This is Russell Cowley, Vice President of North America Sales. Folks, we have a fantastic lineup for you this morning, packed full of information about our wonderful product, Sol. Folks, this morning's going to be wonderful. The presenter that we have for us today, Dr. Bradford Weeks, absolutely a pleasure and an honor, and so appreciative to him for setting a time, his busy schedule, to share with us some valuable insight on the power of Sol. With that being said, Dr. Weeks, I'd like to turn the time over to you. And again, I would like to express a big thank you for sharing your time with us.
Certainly, and good morning, everybody. I'm on this webinar off the coast of America on a little island called Whidbey Island, just a little north of Seattle. And so for all of you who are calling in from the Midwest, I was there recently where it was 40 below, and I was in New England where it was 20 below, so I hope that you're all warm. For those of you in California, it's time to develop some empathy for everybody else. Now, I'm a medical doctor. I trained back at the University of Vermont and at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, and I studied psychiatry and neurology, but I went into medicine after having done some PhD preparatory work at Massachusetts General Hospital, studying endocrinology, basically mineral metabolism with Dr. Robert Neer, and then I was quite fortunate to work with Dr. Michael Hollick, who many of you know as now he's considered Mr. Vitamin D. So we've paid a lot of attention to nutrition and endocrinology through the years. Also, I'm a beekeeper. I've been an organic beekeeper for the past 30 years. I pay a lot of attention to our natural environment, and that's why we live in this little piece of paradise here off the coast of America on Whidbey Island. I say that by way of introduction because part of what we're doing here today is I'm making myself available as a resource for all of you if you have questions or if you want your doctors to speak with me. I have studied extensively now the nutritional components of seeds in general and the seeds which are the ingredients of Sol in particular, and I am quite enthusiastic. So this is just the beginning of our relationship. If you have questions, you'll be able to email them to Russ. He'll pass them on to me. We'll get your questions answered. There is tremendously powerful and impressive science behind the product called Sol, and I want you to learn about that. And that's the purpose of this webinar today. This will be recorded, so certainly come back and pay attention to it as you need to. Now, I have raised, with my wife Laura, 4 children, and we have eaten organic food all the way along because if you don't know this, you must understand that the pesticides and the toxins in the environment are concentrated in the seeds. They are concentrated in the oily components of the plant, and of the oily components of the plant, the seed is primary. So I am very grateful that Rain is using organic seeds, and I'm very grateful that they have been able to take these seeds and process them in a way which retains their nutrient value. And not only their nutrient value, but all of the other components, which I'll go into in detail, which the seed affords us. Seed nutrition is the frontier. There's wonderful juices and magic fruits from all over the world, but the seed is where the future of nutrition is. And so we'll talk about that. In my medical practice, also quickly by way of introduction, for the past 25 years, what I've focused on is helping people get off of medications. As a medical doctor, I approve of medications. They save lives, they're fabulous, but as everyone knows, they're often too expensive, and they have very serious side effects. So if we can use medications appropriately, which means typically short-term, while we're seeking for the problem, the actual underlying problem, which is typically a nutrient imbalance, too much of this or too little of that, once we correct that nutrient imbalance, happily, the medication becomes redundant. So typically, if you know people who are on medications, it's only because their doctor hasn't focused on how to get them off the medications, by replenishing their nutrient deficiencies. And I have to tell you, after working with Sol for the past 6 or 8 months, I'm astonished at how superior Sol is to medications. It's not a medication. It's not a drug. And I want to make sure everyone understands that. But what it does, as you'll see, is Sol helps the body be healthy enough that it rebalances its imbalances, and therefore synthetic patented drugs become obsolete. Okay, so let's go through this PowerPoint quickly, and rather than lingering on a lot of the slides, what I'll do is I'll go through relatively quickly because it will be recorded and people can come back for more information. So typically I will make a statement in these slides, and if people don't believe the statement, for example, that the black cumin seed has been proven to have powerful anti-cancer effects in a number of molecular ways, including, for those of you who pay attention to this, stimulating p53, which is a cancer suppressor gene. It's an oncogene which shuts down cancer, and if you can stimulate p53, Sol is composed of a seed which stimulates p53, which shuts down cancer. Now, does that mean that Sol cures your cancer? No, but it does mean that Sol helps your body deal more effectively with the challenge of cancer. Now, for an oncologist listening in, that would be pretty shocking news, that this 2-ounce packet of delicious crushed seed can do what his chemotherapy drugs are doing, which is to stimulate p53. So we'll go through some of those in detail, but again, I'm going to make some pretty outlandish claims here because I know how powerful this product is, and if anybody doesn't believe it, the references are in this PowerPoint. So again, good morning everybody, and here we go. The first thing that I want to show, and I'm going to try to make this work like this. The first thing I want to show is the next slides. So Russ, there we are. The goals for this presentation. As you can see, fundamentally, we want to make sure that we have a good nutrition. Nutrition comes first, good food, good water, and then we can talk about supplements, including Sol. And then lastly, we can talk about things like medications. But let's have a good nutrition. And that doesn't just mean choosing good food, it means choosing to not eat bad food. We'll go through some of that. I'm also going to share what's specifically interesting about seeds, what's unique about Sol, and remind you again that Sol does not treat diseases. Sol helps the body do its work. Finally, since we're talking about seeds, I'm going to encourage you as a business builder to think more like a gardener than like a salesperson. This is really not a sales business. This is a teaching business, which is why teachers do really well in this business. And fundamentally, gardeners do the best because it's not just about throwing seeds down and hoping they grow. It's about coming back and talking with the people that you've encouraged to join your business and to help them as a gardener would water and nourish the seed. Now, Lao Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher, a lot of people have paid attention to seeds, and he says, to see things in the seed, that is genius. And I'd like to tip my hat right now to all the people in RAIN International, and particularly our president, Byron Belka, because he saw what's in the seed, and he's pioneering the entire industry of seed nutrition. But Lao Tzu said, to see things in the seed, that is genius. Now, my brother Stuart, who's a great fan of Henry David Thoreau, said that Thoreau quoted, "I have great faith in a seed. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders." And I have to tell you, folks listening in, you have a seed in your product Sol. You have 3 seeds, a black cumin, the black raspberry, and the chardonay grape seed. And you should be prepared to expect wonders because these seeds are doing miraculous things. My practice is holistic medicine. We call it corrective health because what we do is we correct the imbalances and then the body takes off. And what we've done over the years is to try to empower people. It's coincidental but kind of nice that our old logo, you'll see on the right, is kind of like a seed. I think that's kind of nice. Now, here's a little bit of Whidbey Island. We grow almonds, we grow raspberries, we grow grapes. And if you look here in the middle, you'll see the parts of the seed. And I want to call your attention initially to the seed coat. And what's interesting for you to understand, and this is fascinating biology, is that there's more nutrition in the seed coat than in the rest of the seed. That's almost like a lamination of polymannose and other sugars. So that's an extraordinary accomplishment. And the biologists who work with agriculture, who I know, tell me that the plant exerts more effort. It costs more energy to ripen the seed than to grow the rest of the fruit. So we're really addressing the treasure chest of the plant, and that's the seed. And it's a good thing that Byron Velka and the team at Rain International include the ground-up husk of the seed in the sole, because that's a nutrient treasure house. Now, the most important medical consideration for you to talk with your colleagues about in terms of the benefit of the product sole is that it's an anti-inflammatory food. Not a drug, not a medicine, it's a food. It's made from the seeds of 3 highly anti-inflammatory plants. And what's important about inflammation? Well, inflammation is all people are talking about in the news nowadays. All chronic major degenerative illnesses hurt you by way of inflammation. And if you can cut down chronic inflammation, you're going to cut down the suffering from most every major illness. For example, although I was taught 25 years ago that inflammation always resulted in pain, so if you had a sore ankle or a sore knee, you had inflammation there, it is the case, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're listening to this webinar and have no pain at all, you are still most likely suffering from inflammation, because we now know that not only is obesity related to chronic inflammation, but also chronic cellular aging, the march of time, is an inflammatory process, which if you address with effective, safe anti-inflammatory agents, you're in a situation where you're going to slow down aging. Now, arthritis, of course, is inflammatory, but we can go even more particular to the cytokines, which are released in an inflammatory process, which are the destroyers of your cartilage and your joints. Cardiovascular disease, the heart disease, the stroke, and the heart attack, that begins with an inflammatory process, and it kills through inflammation. It leads to the calcification and the blockage. Most importantly, cancer itself is not dangerous unless it metastasizes. Many people, upon death from a heart attack or something, are found to have had cancers. When I was working in the, as a diener in the wards of Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, we typically would find people upon autopsy who had cancer and they never knew it. So the problem is, if they had a lot of inflammation, it would have metastasized. So the lady who has had a breast taken off and the doctor says, don't worry, you're cured of cancer, she had better be paying attention to her inflammation markers, because if the breast is off with the cancer but there's still cancer stem cells around and she has inflammation in her life, they will spread. So if you want to stop cancer metastasis, you need powerful anti-inflammatories. Finally, I mentioned stem cells. It's a very interesting development in oncology today. Stanford just received $90 million to study this in a grant. The cancer metastasis is an inflammatory process, but also the recruitment of healthy stem cells to become dangerous cancer stem cells works through an inflammatory process. Lastly, schizophrenia and psychosis. These are considered significantly inflammatory processes. So diabetes, etc., no matter what's going on inside you, you will be healthier if you can tone down the inflammation. And as you know, most of the drugs on the market just deal with one component of the whole inflammatory cascade, and they have typically very, very serious side effects. Aspirin will make your gut bleed and you'll die from loss of blood. A lot of the COX inhibitors have been taken off the market for all sorts of reasons. So to do anti-inflammation safely and effectively has been an elusive goal of the pharmaceutical companies, We have that benefit with these natural seed products. Okay, now just to underscore that a bit, here's an article published in 2010, comes out of Harvard, and they basically are saying that if you want to interfere with inflammation, that's the new strategy to block breast cancer, self-renewal, and progression. Self-renewal and progression is a way of saying metastases. Ladies and gentlemen, if people you know and love have cancer, they need to be taking Sol to help their body create enough anti-inflammatory process to shut down the metastases. Here's an interesting piece on infertility. I'm going to show you different examples of how inflammation can hurt you. Women suffering from asthma, another inflammatory process, are more likely to have difficulty becoming pregnant because there's inadequate circulation to the womb based on inflammatory problems. Very interesting little piece there. How about asthma again? 10% of American children now and 235 million people worldwide are suffering from asthma. Asthma is a very easy disease to treat. You fix the food to get the anti-inflammatory foods in the diet and the pro-inflammatory foods out of the diet, and then a product like Sol can shut down the symptoms of asthma very quickly. But 10% of American children, ladies and gentlemen, this is astonishing. Now, Alzheimer's. All of us are paying attention to Alzheimer's, of course. Alzheimer's is an inflammatory disease. If you know people who are suffering from memory disorders or are on their way to Alzheimer's, you need to be giving them some Sol. What we know is that anti-inflammatory approaches that may not cure Alzheimer's disease will likely help slow the progression or the development of this devastating disorder. If you didn't know that Alzheimer's was an inflammatory disease, that's important information. Here's another piece of the information. It shows that the additional studies link the COX-2, that's a cyclooxygenase enzyme, to the loss of brain cells. So also Parkinson's disease, folks, and Lou Gehrig's disease require anti-inflammatory efforts. All right, now, diabetes and obesity, there's a new term, diabesity. They're really related. It's an autoimmune inflammatory disorder, and inflammation may be the single most important mechanism driving this diabetic obesity epidemic. Okay, now let's talk about humor for a minute. I've given you a lot of bad news. I like this joke. The doctor says, we found a mass. The good news is that we have weapons of mass destruction. Now, I'm not talking about chemotherapy. I'm talking about the U.S. diet. That really is the weapon of mass destruction. And here's an article from 2008 warning China and Japan that they would do well to avoid the American diet, which has given them higher rates of American diseases. Cancer and diabetes and so forth are typically American diseases. Not to say that they don't happen in other countries based on environmental toxicity, mercury and so forth, but America really leads the way in bad nutrition. Now, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, I don't have to go into detail on this. These make sense to you if you're paying attention to Sol. You avoid your white sugar, your refined carbohydrates, your trans fatty acids, high fructose corn syrup, genetically modified plants, dairy, which is typically polluted with antibiotics and a lot of hormones, including bovine growth hormone. If you're one of those nice folks who grew up on a farm like I did with the dairy farming and loved milk, I just want to remind you the cows that are being milked today are not the same as the cows that are being milked 40, 50, 60 years ago. The cows that are being milked today are being converted into little micro factories, and the product is not healthy. And remember, fast food leads to poor digestion and obesity. So in contrast, here's what you have when you have Sol. Now, I have to tell you that I received this document, and I haven't personally been able to validate it as accurate. So I can't vouch for the 8 to 10 servings of fruit and 8 to 10 servings of vegetables and the 2 to 3 servings of healthy oils in each of these 2-ounce packets. But I'm betting that it's pretty close because I've seen some remarkable results. And I know people who have actually gone on a Sol fast eating nothing but 5 or 6 packets of sole a day and lost considerable weight in a healthy way because they're well nourished. So maybe it's only going to be 6 servings of fruit, but the fact of the matter is the seed itself is a concentrated reserve of nutrition. The plant puts all its eggs in one basket, and it calls it a seed. The seeds are 20-fold more nutritious than the rest of the plant. It's the treasure chest, and I would eat seeds before I eat anything else because the seeds are where the most nutrition is. Now you know this yourselves because you eat lentils and you eat almonds. Those are seeds. But what happens when we eat cantaloupe or when we eat watermelon is we typically spit out the seeds. We spit out the apple seed because the plant is smart enough to put all of its nutrients in the seed with the hope that the hard husk and the bitter taste will inhibit breaking the husk and digesting the seed. So what Sole has done is they've taken that bitter, hard-to-digest nutrient treasure chest and they've crushed it up and they've added some d-ribose, which is a safe 5-carbon sugar, and some sweetener, and they have made that a delicious way to drink what is otherwise a very bitter, hard-to-digest food. So those husks in the seed of Sole, you want those husks. Let's talk about Mad in America, a very good book which talks about how we're going crazy in this country. We're violent, we're aggressive, we're short-tempered, we're depressed in America because we're eating low-fat foods. The brain is 60% fat, and you need to feed your brain with healthy oils, not trans fatty acids. Trans fatty acids in the 1940s, Dr. Kuzmaier said they cause cancer definitively.